Did yeah, I stopped sharing my screen. There we go.
Thank you, Andy. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our third and final session of our three-part series on universal pre-K. I'm Christine Thorstensen, Director of Early Childhood Development at Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and it is my pleasure to be one of our hosts for today and welcome you. Before we begin, I'd just first like to take a few minutes to acknowledge and thank our partners in this effort. We did not do it alone. So really to thank the San Jose State University Early Childhood Institute, ECI, and also First Five Santa Clara County. I've had the privilege of working with a fabulous team over the past few months to plan and bring to life these conversations. So given that this is our final one, I really just want to acknowledge and thank the amazing team. So Andy Gallagher, Emily Slusser, and Maria Fasaro from ECI, and Heidi Emmerling from First Five. So, deep gratitude to all of you. It's been a real pleasure to work with this team. And I have to say, I have learned so much from them. So thank you. Just a couple housekeeping details before we jump in. Please mute yourself and note that we are recording this session. We will have time for Q&A with our speakers, and please use the chat to submit questions. And also use the chat to introduce yourself and let us know where you're from. These aspirational conversations are intended to spark dialogue among partners as your community plans for and rolls out universal preschool. And our first session challenged us to think deeply about how we can make UPK a warm and affirming experience for all children, families, and educators. And 2 weeks ago, we explored the critical importance of community needs and context when defining and building high-quality early learning systems. And today, we continue our conversation, and we'll look at how we can create a truly inclusive universal pre-K system, one that celebrates the unique strengths of all of our young learners and meets all the learning needs with love and affirmation. We have a fabulous panel of speakers for today. I'm so excited. But first, it's my great pleasure to introduce a true champion for our children, representing California Senate District 13, Senator Josh Becker. Senator Becker was elected to the state Senate in November of 2020 and is the author of several bills focused on many of the most pressing issues of our region: clean energy, voter access and justice reform, the use of technology to provide greater economic mobility. And one of the senator's current bills, SB 1481, is focused on providing 2 meals a day for our youngest learners. And we are just thrilled to be able to support that bill. And I will encourage, if anybody would like more details about it or any updates, they can contact the senator's office. Or you can contact any one of us on the call and we can put you in touch and get more information. So thank you, Senator Becker, for your leadership in Sacramento, all that you are doing for our youngest, their families, and their teachers. And I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. This is wonderful. It's great to look out and see many longtime friends. And as many of you know, this issue is very dear to my heart, as was mentioned. And I served on the Child Care Partnerships Council of San Mateo County. And before that, on Equal Start with Beth Am. That's really how I got really deeper into this area and just further saw the importance and really a roadmap then of what needed to happen. I also want to say it's an honor to be on here with Supervisor Ellenberg, who I know cares very deeply about this issue. We were at another event last weekend, unrelated. I made a comment early childhood. She perked up immediately. Early childhood, what? Yeah. And anyway, it was really fun, and we had a chance to talk a little bit at that time. But also thank you to the community, excuse me, to the Community Foundation for the work you're doing for over $100 million in grants, including to the Big Lift, which is a program that I'm very excited about. We got some additional, I was able to get some additional state support for last year. And last year was just a tremendous year, and it was really the culmination. I was glad to be part of it, but it was really the culmination of a lot of work that had been done by many of you. I remember we used to talk about 5% for the first 5, and just talking about how we had to really dramatically increase funding for early childhood. And it was a record year. I mean, we did $5.5 billion for early learning and childcare, and it was just great. That's what I would hope to do really over 10 years in many ways. And so that was just fantastic. But now it's following through and seeing the impact of that. And then, of course, what's next? Sarah, thank you for that message. Again, I learned so much being part of Child Care Partnerships Council. And fortunately, I still get some of the emails. Sarah left me on the email list, so I still see a little bit of what's happening. But that was really the formation of my of my education, being on that policy committee of what needed to happen. So we just had a huge year last year, including, of course, the universal pre-K, as we're talking about here today. And but there's just so much work that still has to be done, the implementation work around that, and then additional work that we're trying to do this year. For example, even though we were successful in getting $1 billion for childcare rate reform and additional spaces for kids, now we're working on mixed delivery led by Senator Connie Leva, who's just been a huge champion. And this is her last year now, so we have to get a lot done in her last year, and she's championing mixed delivery. We do have the bill that Christine was kind enough to mention around meals for childcare. So there's still a lot that we have to do, and working with our Congress members as well, given their interest in this, and what some of that's already happened, but a lot of it was certainly hoped to happen with Build Back Better, and we're going to see what we can continue to get done there. As you know, about 90% of brain growth happens before kindergarten, so it's just a critical time to start addressing inequities, right? And we have to get kids off to a good start, and then maintain that. And universal TK, we hope, will instill the joy of learning in our state's youngest students, and that's certainly something that we can't put a price on. So I look forward to continuing collaboration on behalf of our youngest students, and on behalf of the kids in childcare, and moving childcare, getting more money down for our youngest too, for our 1 and 2 year olds. So lots to do going forward, but really excited, and glad that you're having this so we can kick it off. I know it's a lot of work for everyone to plan for this in the midst of everything else that they're doing. So thank you. And I have to go present in health committee at some point here. I'll have to disappear, but I'll stay on as long as I can.
Well, thank you, Senator Becker, for joining us, and thank you for that warm welcome. And thank you also, Christine. And as the director of the Early Childhood Institute, I also want to echo that we have really enjoyed and appreciated partnering with both SBCF and First Five in planning this series and envisioning what we wanted to share, and then seeing it all come together has been really rewarding. This final session will continue the conversations that we had before with Kaisha Nzewi and Carla Bryant, which asked us to consider the issues related to equity and to interrogate what we mean when we consider issues related to quality in early childhood care and education. If you missed those conversations, they are available on our website, and we'll share the link to the videos in the chat in a second. Today's conversations are going to push us a bit further to consider the relationship between these issues of quality and equity, and the inclusion of young children with and without disabilities in our early learning programs. And so we are super excited to welcome Wendy Murawski to continue this conversation in today's session. Dr. Murawski is the Executive Director and Eisner Endowed Chair of the Center for Teaching and Learning at California State University at Northridge, and a full professor in the Department of Special Education. She is also one of the nation's top experts in co-teaching and has experience and expertise in supporting collaboration for inclusive education in early childhood through high school. And her research, publications, and presentations have been used nationally and internationally, and also here at SJSU, to help schools become more inclusive through the use of collaborative teaching. So without further ado, welcome Wendy Murawski.
Unmute myself. That's always got to be the first part, right? Thank you. Very excited to be here. So always have to check. We can see my screen. We are good to go. All right, perfect. Well, I am very honored to be part of this series. I was very much enjoying the first two and honored to be the third one in this area. And we have a lot to talk about and a little time to do it. So we are going to be focusing on inclusion and what that means, and trying to envision what it could be. So that's kind of the big picture here.
I've already been introduced, but as Andy mentioned, as Dr. Gallagher mentioned, I really do focus my work on what works with kids, but especially inclusive practices. And I will tell you that in addition to the author and the professor and the stuff like that, I'm a mom, and my own son, I've only have one, but he went to fully inclusive early childhood all the way up through middle school, then a regular high school, and he just got accepted to college. So I'm super excited. I just found, he got acceptances, but we finally decided yesterday. So next year I will be an empty nester. So from all inclusive, little ones, they grow up, and then you see what that kind of education can do for a student. So it's really, really exciting to me. So let's focus on what we're going to do together today. The objectives that after talking with the committee and looking at the whole scope of the work, really hoping that we can look at what are some key elements that we would need to build an inclusive learning environment, recognizing, of course, that in a few minutes we can't delve into all of them, but just to get a sense of that vision. And I think Christine was mentioning that, like, what would we want? What is going to push us forward? Certainly the inclusion piece, but that has to be wrapped up with the equity and quality pieces that were already mentioned. As part of that conversation, I will be clarifying a little bit about what co-teaching is and what that might look like in a UPK environment, thinking about how to collaborate with our community partners, because there's quite a few of you on here today. So we'll be applying that. And then hopefully we'll have fun, because this is all about, having fun, doing stuff together. So what I'd like to do is actually have you, oops, there we go. I want you to think right now. I want you to envision your world, whatever you are, whatever your job is. And all of you are writing down, oh, I'm the director of this, or I'm a teacher, or I'm a this, or a CEO, or this or that professor. Think about your position right now, your job, your world. How would it be in your world if everyone would share their stuff? How would it be if everyone would play nicely with others? If everyone was comfortable saying, I need help. If they were willing to give help if they could. If everyone had a lot of energy. Because right now, I don't know about you guys, I'm not seeing that in my world environment. We're all exhausted. If everybody was comfortable singing and dancing and asking questions and just being silly. If everyone was interested in everyone else. And if no one cared about differences, because there are just so many differences. That would be a pretty awesome environment, wouldn't it? Give me a thumbs up if you would love to be in that environment at work. Yeah, I need some virtual thumbs up, some real thumbs up. There you go. Michael, yes, please bring it on. That's what we're doing with our 4-year-olds, isn't it? I mean, this is literally what we're teaching them. And then we're hoping that they will continue to make that kind of environment for us as they grow up. And I think sometimes we do a great job with kids, and then somehow we lose that skill as adults. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to do. And I see it, having worked with schools that really truly are inclusive and embrace that culture. As the kids continue to grow up, I see how they don't even notice differences, how that's not the first thing that they will mention. And that's the vision. That's kind of what we're looking to do. So let's just talk about what we've got right now. I mean, we've got a lot of kids with identified disabilities. And as most of you know, kids are identified as having disabilities a lot later in life. If we're talking about behavioral disabilities or learning disabilities, et cetera. So the fact that we already have at least 45,000 children in California with identified disabilities already in early childhood. So that's not even those kids who are at risk. We have a lot of students. And as we all also know, we have students that don't have a label, and we absolutely know they need something. And it might be they need something long-term, or it could be short-term. But those are in an inclusive environment. We're thinking about all kids, and we're not really worried about a label. When I was speaking with my early childhood colleagues years ago, I was asking them to share with me, like, what are the components of early childhood? You know, what would you say the major components are? And they came up with these. All children have unique needs. And they said that, this is what we do in California. This is what we're trying. We're trying to say all children have unique needs. We're really trying to focus on process over a content or a product. We want our early childhood educators to plan, implement, assess, reflect. Screening and documentation is a big part of their job, and communication, right? And with all of those, obviously, we're observing, we're having conversations, we're documenting. That's inclusion. You guys are already 100% ahead of the game, because this is literally what we're talking about related to inclusive practices, is if we just do that for everyone and not get worried or concerned that we have children who happen to have a label or happen to look differently or happen to express their needs in a different way. So really, a lot of this is a mindset. I thought I would start by kind of organizing this conversation, and I promise it's not just going to be me talking at you. You're going to have a chance to talk back in just a few minutes. But the key elements, some of the key elements, there's more that we could put in there, but we have to limit it today. Some of the ones that I would want to highlight for you all are, number one, to know the related laws and policies. We first of all have to know what paradigm we're working in. We also need to recognize what we mean when we're talking about an inclusive learning community. What would that look like in a nutshell? How do we establish a collaborative culture, and with whom could we collaborate? What would co-teaching look like in early childhood? And then what are these major big concepts that we hear about with universal design for learning, differentiated instruction, and specially designed instruction? Okay, so that's where we're gonna go from here. So the first one, that first element, is the essential laws and the policies. And inclusion as a philosophy is that it's not a law. There's not a law that's telling you you must do inclusion or you must have full inclusion. In fact, we kind of stay away from the words full inclusion because there's certainly a spectrum of what we're doing, a continuum of services that kids may need. But when we say we want to be inclusive and we're trying to have more inclusive environments, it means that we have a philosophy, a mindset, a belief that all students who are differently challenged in a variety of ways, that they're accepted, and they're accepted in our general activities, whatever those activities are, with appropriate adaptations or assistance. And it's that last little bit that kind of gets us, right? What are those appropriate adaptations or assistance? What are we supposed to provide? And if you think about this philosophy, that really relates to what our other two speakers talked about before with equity and with quality. And I threw in social justice because inclusion is very much a social justice issue. And these aren't things that we can say are the law. You legally have to be equitable. You legally have to provide quality. I mean, we can say it, but what does it mean? We really just have to feel like we're doing what's right. So as we're having that vision of what we want it to look like, we have to believe truly that all children, regardless of their language when they come in, their culture, their background, their ability or disability, that all children have the right to have that high quality, equitable environment, that learning environment. And that takes a little work on our part. So certainly there are laws that you need to be aware of: least restrictive environment, free appropriate public education. The other two are individualized family service plans, specially designed instruction. There are lots of laws out there, but you got people who will know them, or hopefully you do. You have people you can go to. I do have a book out there. So those of you who really have a lot of time on your hands and want to read a very, very thick book on special ed law and policy, you do you. Go ahead and get that book. But there are people who know the laws. Right now, I feel like for an inclusive environment, a big heavy lift of this is just feeling like it's the right thing for us to do. So how do we do that? So moving into the second one, it's that inclusive learning environment. So I have a belief now, I have a philosophy that students should have their needs met. They can have their needs met together. What does that look like? Well, easy answer is we shouldn't be removing them. We shouldn't be secluding or excluding or failing or bullying. And I think we know that. The more students feel accepted, the more students feel engaged and successful, the better. That's kind of the no-brainer, right? That's what we're hoping for. We've really, in all of my research and my professional development, going around and working with schools, years ago, that was the lift. It was having people believe that students have the right to be in the same classroom and be together. You know, in communities, you would see, oh no, those individuals are different. Now that's no longer as much the issue. I mean, we still certainly have some issues, but for the most part, when I'm working with districts, with organizations, with schools, with teachers, it doesn't feel like the question is, do they have the right? Now most people are saying, okay, I believe that, I'm open, but how? How do I do this? So you'll notice on the right of the screen that I have some of these components right there. We want them to be in the general education classes with those supports and services. That's that inclusion piece that I'm talking about. We have to prepare the learning environment. So how do we do that? That involves scheduling. It involves our layout of the room, the materials, the resources, how are we training our teachers? That universal design for learning, which we'll talk about a little bit more a little bit later today. But then it also takes some of the pieces that you heard about in your other two sessions. Do we have all of our students actively engaged? Do they have materials and content that's accessible to them and a sense of belonging? That's part of that quality piece. And are we valuing, truly celebrating and valuing diversity, not saying you're different, so you're going to go somewhere else and get something different, but rather, wow, we're all different in different ways. So we're preparing our students, even our young ones, with being sensitive and aware and an understanding that fair does not mean equal. It means you get what you need. And that's that equity piece. And we're going to be coming back to this slide and trying to figure out, like, how do we actually do these things? So this third piece is a collaborative culture. We need to develop a collaborative culture in our environments. And collaboration is defined as a style of interaction. It's not I do collaboration from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. It's the way that we work together. We have shared goals, resources, accountability. We call it teamwork. And obviously we can apply it to multiple situations and contexts. So it can be with other adults. It can be with the students. We actually are teaching the students how to collaborate. But the more collaborative a culture is, the easier it is to have an inclusive environment. And I'm going to repeat that because we have research supporting this. The more collaborative a culture is, the easier it is to be inclusive, because we're already playing nicely with others. We're already communicating. We're already problem solving. We're sharing resources and accountability. So that's a big part of an inclusive environment. Oh, it looks like my screen got off a little bit there. I'm going to see if this will work for me. Hang on, I just had a little. Are you guys seeing? Nope, now you're seeing each other, huh? I had a little technical difficulty. Well, let me ask you this, because this is what I was trying to get to, and then I thought I could show a different screen. Let me ask, as I'm just talking to you guys for a second, if we are trying to collaborate, we're saying that we have all these different ways that we can collaborate, is sharing these resources, is pulling it all together. I would like to know who you think you could collaborate with. Like, who are the individuals with whom you could collaborate around inclusive education? If you guys could use it in the chat, go ahead and add some of those things. Who could you collaborate with? And think from your own role. Like, so if you're a professor at a university, who are you collaborating with? If you're a community organization, who are you collaborating with? If you're a teacher, etc. Let me see what some people are saying here. I'm looking for the chat. There you go. Starting it off. So even at the university level, we can co-teach classes, we can co-plan our program so that we're modeling collaboration. Excellent. Yes. So even at the supervisor's office, being able to collaborate with subject matter experts. Supervisor Ellenberg, you can't be the expert on everything, right? We look to you, but you're looking to other smart people who know that stuff. That's what we're all doing. We're all good at something, but we have to recognize there are others. I love this. Yes, being able to talk with parents and families. They're the experts in their children and what they're looking for. Being able to collaborate with a principal, superintendent, other librarians, classroom aides, community organizations. Yes, charter schools, agencies, high school students, cross-content departments, first 5, Collaborating with early educators and parents, families, neighborhood caregivers. Excellent. San Mateo County agencies. All right. So the point is there's a lot of people out there with whom we can collaborate. They're going to bring us these different things because we'll have an area that we're going to be great at. And then we're going to have some things that we're going to be looking for others to help us out. All right. So let me get back to this for a second here. There we go. All right. So what are we teaching? Well, we have a whole bunch of different things. Are you guys seeing my screen again? Because I want to make sure.
We're seeing your screen, but it's not in the presentation mode. So I'm not sure
No,
if you want to.
it is on mine, and that's I think my computer.
Oh, there it goes.
Doing the overheating.
Oh.
Oops.
It was
Yes, I know.
right.
Yeah, let me try again.
No problem.
That's it. You know, I've been doing Zoom all day with my presentation, and it'll work and then it won't work. So I don't know what's going on here. It's not showing it in there, is it? All right,
No.
folks. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. I'll just try again. All right. I apologize. Nope, it's still not showing, huh?
And now we don't see
Anything.
anything. Well, we see you.
All right.
So that's a win.
Well, I don't know about that because on mine, it is showing everything. I love that when that happens. All right, guys, sorry about this. We will try one more time. Let me.
We've all been there.
I know. And you know, again, I've been doing this. I presented this morning in Switzerland, and then I've been presenting all day. So you feel like, okay, I've got this. We're not having a problem. And then that happens. Oh, well, we will play with this. We'll get creative. We'll figure it out. Okay. So you're not, unfortunately, it's not showing the screen the way it's supposed to
Oh,
be.
no, this is good.
Yeah, except it has a couple things on top of it, but that's all right. So what are we teaching? It's fine. You guys are educators, you understand. What are we teaching? Obviously, there's so many things that we're teaching. We're teaching the collaboration and friendships and safety and hygiene and following directions, the sense of time, the compassion, the developmentally appropriate academics. And even though on the side, it's got it all kind of mixed up there, like you said, we're collaborating with all these people, our paraprofessionals. I didn't notice them in the chat, but they are just so helpful. Our specialists, like our occupational and physical therapists or speech, psychologists, counselors, bus drivers, custodians, and certainly our community partners. So lots of people with whom we can collaborate. And I'm just moving this over for a moment here. There we go. All right. So let's go back for a moment then to this slide. Because I know that there are a lot of community partners who are part of this conversation, I'd like you to tell me, given the stuff on the right that we're trying to accomplish in inclusive education, how can collaborating with community partners support these efforts? What do you guys see that community partners could do to help us create these truly inclusive environments? I'm gonna keep an eye on that chat. Sometimes it takes a while for people to be able to type. Awesome. Center the child for sure. But you guys help me with like really concrete things. Like, why do I go? I'm trying to have an inclusive school, inclusive UPK. I'm looking to my community partners. What am I looking to them for? How can they help me? If I'm reaching out, there you go. There's, yeah, right there, right? I can reach out to First Five and say, what do the families need? What are the issues that you guys are hearing that maybe I'm not hearing? What else? What else can I get, or how could I collaborate? Definitely. We're learning best practices from each other. The things that I'm seeing in the classroom, the things you're seeing out in the community. Yeah, definitely. What are the barriers to inclusion? What are they hearing? What are they seeing? What are some gaps? Also, what are we doing well? What should we continue to do? What else? Cross visits. So we're learning from one another. Love that. The children can learn from other environments as well. Any more? Hoping I could hear some of you. I guess our panelists will give us some more of these ideas of what they've done. I was hoping to get a few of them out there. Yeah, definitely a resource to ask questions. What have you seen? What else could we be doing? What are we missing? Could you come in and give us some feedback as an outside source? Oh, here we go. We got a few more on there. Excellent. Okay, having an inclusion collaborative where people are learning all together, gaining support, training, research, making the space and time, helping us make the space and time for collaboration, because that's often missing. And asking kids what they need. Wonderful. Good. Supporting them, they support us, networking. Excellent. All right, so lots of things that we can be doing with one another. I'm going to move to our fourth one, which is the co-teaching. And some of you may or may not have a lot of experience related to co-teaching. So in fact, if you had to, and I'm trying to get more chat dynamic going on, but if you had to give yourself a number related to your knowledge and experience of co-teaching, 0 being I got nothing, 1 being I have heard of it, 2 being I have a little experience, and 3 being I'm pretty good. What number would you give yourself? A 0, 1, 2, or 3? Put it in the chat. Oh, I like the teaching pyramid training. Nice. Oh, excellent. We started with somebody who's got a lot. Good. Got a few who've got a lot. Okay, keep them coming. Some 2s and 3s. Excellent. Good, good, good. Keep coming. And we get more of you to use your chat. All right. So we have diverse. I don't see any 0s. Usually I see some 0s, but what we're talking about, obviously co-teaching requires collaboration, but you can easily collaborate. All of you collaborate in various ways and you don't necessarily co-teach. What we're really trying to see with co-teaching is that we're seeing educators, 2 or more professional educators. Now, this would not include our paraprofessionals or our parent volunteers or people coming in to volunteer. This is 2 credentialed teachers or certificated teachers who co-plan, co-instruct, and co-assess. Now, we can have others help us out for sure, but we're talking about individuals who are professionals in their area. And they co-plan, they co-instruct, and they co-assess this diverse group of students in the same environment. Why do we do it? Well, because really even superheroes need help. So you might have phenomenal teachers. You might have a fantastic early childhood special educator and an early childhood educator, but even together, they're going to be better. And that's what the essential question of co-teaching is how is what the 2 people are doing together substantively different and better for kids than what one adult would do alone. And often we have a lot of adults in the room, but the fact that we would have 2 people with different training to bring in those different frames of reference makes it more inclusive right there, because we're able to take our different training and think about how we're going to address the student's needs. So the vision, again, going back to that, yeah, I would love to see that too, Heidi. We'd love to see inclusion specialists in every early learning and care setting. And that's exactly what I was having right here on the screen. It's almost like you read my mind or my screen. So the vision, what if we did have every UPK class with 2 credentialed educators who had different areas of expertise? What if they actually had time to co-plan? What if they had direct access to their community partners? Right? Think about what this could mean, where we're not going to have teachers who are feeling like, I don't know what to do with this child who learns differently or behaves differently or has social skill challenges, who perseverates on things in class or, has certain tics. I don't know what to do. And so I push them off to somebody else. Instead, it would be like, hey, partner who happens to be here in the room, what can we do together? So I thought I would give you just a little glimpse of what these would look like. And really, these are the different co-teaching approaches that we could use together when we are co-teaching. They're adapted from Marilyn Friend and Lynn Cook. One teach, one support, parallel, station, alternative, and team. So one teach, one support just exactly like it sounds. You have one person who's kind of leading something, you have somebody supporting, you might have paraeducators in the room as well, aides or assistants helping. And really it would be, for example, one of the teachers has maybe got the children sitting on the carpet and we're reading a story about friendships. And obviously all of the 4-year-olds are sitting quietly with their hands in their lap and they're listening intently and their mouths are shut. Yeah, I'm waiting for anybody to laugh. Okay, good, good. Right, so clearly not. We've got a basket of kittens sitting trying to listen to a story about friendships. So that makes sense. If we know that we were going to do that, we would have one of us going around and using proximity control, helping with behavior, asking questions, letting kids ask the questions themselves, passing out materials, letting the students touch the book, maybe taking a student aside if we needed to, observing their behavior and taking notes about what they're interested in and what questions they have, clarifying different vocabulary, all of that kind of stuff. That's just an example. And that's one that hopefully all of you are very familiar with, right? You've seen that a million times. If that's all you see, we wouldn't call it really co-teaching because it doesn't feel like it's substantively different than what we see a lot. What we want to see is taking it up a notch. We do this sometimes, but then let's also see some parallel teaching. And while teachers and adults may do this sometimes, like, hey, you take half, I take half. When we're co-teaching, we're co-planning it, which means we're thinking about what are the goals? We're thinking about what are the objectives of what we're trying to do. So it's a meaningful, it's a thoughtful engagement that we're doing on purpose, as opposed to just, I can't take them all, you take half. So here's an example. If we're doing this in nature, like we really want to have some nature activities, maybe one of us has a mixture of leaves and it's also got some rocks and some twigs and some pods and different things. And the children are sorting. Now, notice that next thing says adaptations, because we have to recognize in an inclusive environment that not all the kids are going to just be like, yes, I know how to sort, let me do that. You're going to need perhaps some extra size leaves for some children who struggle with their gross motor. Maybe you have some gloves for children who struggle with sensory issues. You might want to have a graphic organizer, like a big piece of paper where they can put all of the leaves in one category, like one box out of it so that they see it, maybe with a picture of a leaf on there. You might want to have some different textures for children. You might want to already prep some questions for different cognitive challenges. Some children who are going to struggle just knowing the difference between a leaf and a twig, and others who are ready to compare and contrast and have deep dive conversations about nature and what they know from their, nature parents. And then your second co-teacher at that same exact time might be doing a different activity still related to nature, but maybe they're looking at leaf types and sizes, and maybe they've got microscopes or we've got books and we're matching up pictures of leaves. Again, we still have to have some things that we're thinking of proactively, like various levels of books, some that are just picture books, but then maybe some can even have some words in there for kids to identify if they're already ready to look at their letters. Having magnifying glasses, different vocabulary, adapted microscopes, and assistive technology. So thinking about those things that are really purposeful, and then you guys can flip groups. So everybody's able to do both. Think about how a community partner might be able to help us with themes. So I just came up with a random, nature one, but maybe, there are certain things that are really, really popular with families or communities are dealing with. I would love to know that, because if I could embed that in the classroom, that would be fantastic. What if I don't have resources and I'm struggling? Like, I would really love to have an adapted microscope. I do not have that. My co-teacher and I have no idea where to get that. Maybe we talk to a community resource to say, do you know of any, university science classes that are trying to get rid of certain things? Like, what else do you have that might help us with this? So that's just a glimpse at parallel teaching. Station teaching. So station teaching is a lot like centers, right? And it's pretty much we have all these different centers going on. How stations are different than our typical centers is a lot of times in early childhood, we'll have centers just out there and the children can, I'm running to the art center, I'm running over here to the drama center, or I'm doing all of this and just they get to go wherever they want. And that's still obviously an option. But in centers, it could also be that we're saying we're going to have them in these created groups to focus on something, to have it, and it can still be very child-centered and student-driven, but a little bit more organized if we're trying to think about what are the goals that we're trying to do, and recognizing that some of our children are going to really struggle with transition, and they're going to need some additional structure that maybe not all the students need quite as much of. So an example of that might be that one co-teacher is taking a small group outside. They're going to take a walk in nature. They're going to start finding those twigs and the leaves and stuff that they can sort later. Maybe the second co-teacher has a small group taking them to the creative center, and they're going to tell stories about different items. And that can be both verbally or non-verbally. We can have some assistive technology already pre-planned in there. Maybe we talk to our community organizations and we say, hey, we want a guest visitor, help us. Come in, tell us about different jobs that are out in the community. Help us find unique ones. You know, we always love having police officers and firemen and teachers and other people like that, but what else is out there that might be interesting? And we could get people to come and do show and tell or lead some activity. And then also having maybe a paraprofessional, if you have one in the room, as students are, you know, watching a little video or playing playing with their computers or playing with balls or whatever it may be. So lots of different things. And then the children would rotate through. So they're experiencing everything. And what the co-teachers are doing is we're collecting data. We're trying to see, you know, what do we need to work on for behavior? What do we work on academically? What do we need to do for social skills or self-esteem? And then we'll be able to come together with a team to see where we need to, you know, improve, who we need to work on individually and where we need to work as a group. So now I want, again, hopefully in the chat, I'm going to try the chat again, man. You are being invited. Okay, you and your role, whatever your job is, you don't have to make up one. I'm a co-teacher in a UPK class, and my partner and I, let's say, Dr. Andy, you and I are co-teaching UPK, right? And we're tired. We need some guest speakers. We need some help. And we have so many friends. They're all here. So we've just sent out a large chat to everybody and said, hey, we'd like you to come in and do a station with us. So you guys tell us what you would do. What would you do? And if like you love pottery, maybe you'll come in and you're going to show us pottery. Or if you know, secretly are writing a novel, you can talk about what it's like to write a book, or, you know, whatever it is. You like to bake? Come in and talk to us about baking. So everybody in the chat, tell me something. What would you do? You could talk to us about your job. You could talk to us about going to a foreign language. Oh, Heidi's going to lead song. Thank you, because you haven't heard me sing, right? I'm willing to try. I'll lead dance. All right, we got Heidi for song, but I need more people telling us what they do. Come on, Michael, I want to hear what you're going to do. I'm inviting you into this room. Come on. Oh, thank you, Karen. Karen is going to show us how to make a smoothie. She's going to teach the kids about smoothies, and best is we end up getting to have the smoothies at the end. Karen's going to lead a story. Guadalupe is going to have some art going on. I love it. Catherine's got some children's literature. Oh, Kristen's got a verbal collaborative storytelling. Oh, and our superintendent here is going to read stories on a pretend camping trip. Oh, and we'll bring in a tent and they get to sit in the tent and have this storytelling. I love this. Oh, Heriberto is going to help us just look at how do you get information from looking at pictures? That pictures have so much. You guys have already done so much. Oh, we've got outdoor painting with magic paint and dance time. What's funny is most of you, as far as I can tell, nobody's telling me about their job. I'm going to talk to them about being a professor. I'm going to talk to them about being the CEO of this company. No, yeah. Oh, dogs go well. Beadwork, dance time, fantastic. So look at, we have all these people who have all these wonderful credentials and degrees and all that. And yet they're bringing in so many creative things for us that we wouldn't have known if we didn't ask. If we didn't say, we would love you to come in, and then you'll get to know more about our classes. We'll get to see that. And I want you guys to also look at how little of that requires a lot of academic ability, right? So even our students who are struggling with academics can do it, like learn about dogs, absolutely, and be engaged in that conversation and probably learn so much. So when we think about disabilities, a lot of times people are like, oh, disabilities, they're having issues with language, they're having issues with behavior, they're having issues with academics, they're having issues with self-regulation and emotions. Those are the things we're teaching 4-year-olds. Like those are literally the things we expect issues with because of their age, which is kind of awesome. We don't have to worry about labels. We just have to say, where are you? Because you guys are all over the map, as by the way, most of us are. All right, moving right on. Alternative teaching is a large group and a small group. And what I want you to be super careful of if you're going in, observing or talking about alternative teaching is that that small group can be used for reteaching or pre-teaching or enrichment. But what we don't want is for it to feel like we've got a large group are typical learners, and then we've got a small group is just we're kind of class within a class pulling out our kids with disabilities. That's 100% not what alternative is for. But it could very well be for kids with different interests or kids who need some pre-teaching of vocabulary because they don't have the same context or background. Maybe they didn't have a literature-rich environment like some of the other children did. So being able to know that these are options, and when we have 2 adults working together in this inclusive environment, we can do it. We can meet these needs. You may need some planning time. And then finally, team teaching. And team teaching is where we've got everybody together, you know, the whole group, we're trying to manage them. But what are you and I doing together? Well, we're role playing, we're debating, we're modeling, we're showing them how to collaborate. So maybe it's during circle time. And as we've got the kids sitting there and we're talking about their day, which relates to language and nature, we're also envisioning talking about, hey, I know we said that today is Wednesday. How do you say that in Spanish? How do you say that in Farsi? How do you say that in German? So we've got culture going on. We've got communication. We could be saying, look around the room. How many people in this room have brown hair? Now we're talking about colors, but we're also doing movement and numbers. Can you show me with your fingers? And what pets do you have? How did you come up with their names? So we got some storytelling, which a lot of you could lead for us, and identity. How do you make a new friend? Creativity, social development, community. And my partner and I are co-teaching by doing this together. So I might say, do you have any pets, Dr. Andy? And she'll say, yeah, I do. What do you have, Dr. Wendy? And we're like having this little conversation together. And then we're asking them. So we've just modeled how we answer, how we respond if we have questions, that kind of thing. So team teaching, another good way of doing it. So, you know, again, I'm always thinking I'm going to have a whole lot of interaction. So I'm going to keep trying here. I want to know what you all think, why co-teaching could be an important service delivery option for supporting and developing inclusive UPK communities. So what are the benefits is what I'm saying. What do you think benefits to children are? And what do you think benefits even to the adults are? Looking at the chat. What are the benefits to children or adults? Why are we doing this? Yes, so Kristen started us off with, hey, we've got a lot of different teaching approaches. So collaborating, bring it together, learning from one another is good for children. We've got a bunch of different needs. So being able to have more adults in the room to help one-on-one, definitely. And not just that fact that we teach differently, but we know that children have different, we call them neurodevelopmental profiles. You know, attention, we can't just say, oh, they don't have attention. Well, first of all, they're 4, so we don't expect a lot of attention. But also, children have different attention like we do as adults. If I asked all of you, do you have attention deficits? Some of you would say yes, some of you would say no. But if I said, do you have a lot of attention at 6 a.m. before your cup of coffee? I bet you a bunch of you would be like, no, I am deficit of attention. Or if I said, what about after 10 p.m.? You'd have some of you who are like, I'm just waking up, and others, I'm deficit of attention. We all have different neurodevelopmental profiles, and that's exactly the same as our children, even when they're little. So being able to think about that, recognize that. Emily said that she appreciates the intentionality behind being able to establish these opportunities to collaborate and have structure. It's not me just kind of quick herding cats or trying to do at the moment. It's somebody else being able to say, did you notice this happen? What can we do about it? And me say, oh my gosh, you're right, I didn't notice, but here are some ideas. You know, we're doing this together. We're getting the different styles from one another. And the children are not just learning from us, they're learning from each other. So quick little story, and then I'm gonna keep going, but I told you that my own son had gone to a fully inclusive school. Those of you who are familiar with Chime in the Los Angeles area, I helped start the Chime Middle School. I was director of research for Chime for 12 years. I'm a proponent. And so, yeah, clearly when I got pregnant, I already knew where my child was going to go. And he went to the early childhood program. And then he also went to the pre-K and the K, and then all the way up through middle school. But one of my favorite stories is that when he was in elementary school, he was so excited. He wanted to have a play date with one of his friends, Gabe. And Gabe came over after school. And of course, I'm a teacher. So I said, as the mom / teacher, you have to do your homework first. They only had a little bit of homework, but you have to sit here. And of course, I'm making very healthy snacks. I'm sure it was healthy. So the two boys are sitting at the table and they're supposed to do their homework. And my son Kieran is like, I mean, he is just moving. He is so excited about this play date. He just wants to do that. And Gabe turns to him, I can't even tell you, maybe he was 7, 8. And he said, Kieran, I have ADHD and they have taught me that I should probably use a timer, and then I should just know I'm doing one thing at a time. And if I focus like that, it helps me get things done. And I think you need those strategies. And I just loved it. So I'm sitting there going, wow, here's this little kid advocating for himself and starting to give strategies to someone else. So that's fantastic. All right, so we've got lots of different things. Children are improving, as you guys are writing on there. The adults are expanding our own needs. Children are socializing, integrating them. Absolutely. We can give individual support. If you notice a problem, one of you can go deal with it right away while the show goes on. And definitely having older kids come in and share lessons and talk about what's going on, share about their dogs. Love it. All right. So I spent quite a bit of time on co-teaching. Obviously, I'm a big fan. It's not the only service delivery option in our collaborative, inclusive UPK classes, but it's a good one and it's a big one. So it is one that we want to be thinking about. The other thing that we have to do, though, to make sure our classes are inclusive is, and this is our element number 5, embrace universal design for learning, differentiated instruction, and specially designed instruction. So not doing whole big trainings on these 3 things, but just to put them on your radar so you can go a little deeper yourselves. Universal design for learning is really about proactively planning our classes, our curriculum, our lessons, the environment. It's saying, wow, I just know kids are different. I don't need a roster to know that I will have 4-year-olds who are going to struggle with attention or behavior or following directions or reading or sitting on the carpet or drawing or gross motor or fine motor or whatever. I know that. Like, that is not a surprise to me. So how can I plan in advance? And how much can I start doing with choice and even with student voice? They're 4 years old, but they have a voice. So how do we embrace that and not just tell them what they can choose this or this, but say, what do you think? So let's get them starting to do their own critical thinking and talking and communicating and start guiding them so that they see that they can do that all the time. Respect the fact that, as you can see on the bottom left side, even our average students are all over the map. There is no real average. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to have our teachers embrace different ways of representing information, different ways of having the kids engage with that information, and then different ways to have the kids show us that they learned something. Differentiated instruction, what probably most of you have heard, is really then being responsive. Now I know that Eli has this particular need because Eli has an identified disability, or Eli is an English learner, and I know what the needs are. So in response to that, I might need to do something very specific. So if I have, if Eli has autism and absolutely has a thing for turtles, then darn it, I'm going to have some manipulative turtles, and I'm going to have some stuffed turtles, and I'm going to have pictures of turtles, and we're going to talk about how turtle starts with T. But I'm really doing that because Eli loves turtles. I wouldn't have known that before I had Eli in my class. So differentiated instruction is a little bit more responsive, still has to be there. And then last but not least is specially designed instruction. Now this is part of the law. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, IDEA, tells us that we really are supposed to have individualized, intensive, responsive instruction for our students who have identified disabilities. We have to meet their needs. We'll have less to do with specially designed instruction if we're already having an inclusive mindset, if we're already collaborating, if we have universal design for learning and differentiated instruction. We're going to need to do a lot less specially designed instruction. So pulling it all together, We're talking with one another. We're planning. What do we want them to do? What are our themes? How are we going to do that? And that's just a general question. That's not about ability or disability. Then our how is, all right, so how are we going to do that? We got 2 of us or 3 of us. We've got more adults. How can we collaborate with our partners? What can we bring in? That's when we talk about our UDL and our differentiation. And after that, only then, after we've created these rock star lessons that are just fantastic for our young learners, all these opportunities for them to grow, then we say, all right, now, is there anything else that we need to do for a child with a disability? Because we've probably already done a great job of including them with the ways that we've already had our right mindset. So then we might reach out to additionals. And our vision, remember, is that everyone shares their stuff and we play nicely. Just think about what you can do to help us get there and what would it take to be truly inclusive. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. We need to change because it's right for kids. It may take work, but it is worth that work. And the last thing I want to share with you is this little video, and it's just a couple second video. And I think you'll appreciate it.
Collaboration is important because you can get things done and it's fun to work with other people.
Can I go now at the end? And I'm pretty sure some of you are like, okay, can we go now? Not quite yet. We've got some wonderful, wonderful people, panels to tell you how they've been doing. And I think that's where we are right now to wrap this up.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Dr. Morawski. You've given us, I think, a lot to think about. We have actually blocked off some time for some Q&A. So if anybody is interested in posing some of your questions in the chat, we'd be happy to address them. In fact, let me go ahead and introduce myself really quickly as Emily Slesser. I am part of the leadership team with the Early Childhood Institute here at San Jose State. And I just want to say that the latter part of your presentation represents so much of our trajectory with the Early Childhood Institute and the impetus for the work being a collaboration across disciplines. And I've learned so much from my colleagues who have that kind of experience and expertise working with children with disabilities. And I really appreciate the terminology and the structure that you've provided us to navigate this new world in UPK and UTK. So as I wait for some questions to come into the chat, I wonder if maybe I can pose one to you, building off of that theme of inclusion and collaboration being inclusion. Can you talk about the role of the family or expand on the role of that collaboration with the family in these contexts?
Yeah, without a doubt. And, given the tight frame and how much I was trying to talk about, I didn't do a whole lot of that because I sort of figured that's so important in everything we do, and more teachers who can reach out, communities who can bring in their perspectives. I think that's also one of my favorite parts of collaborating, because I feel like we can even co-teach lessons with parents because they are professionals and they're professionals on their children. They also help us generalize these skills that we're working on. So when we've identified goals and objectives that we're trying to get children to do, if our families are part of that conversation, then they're helping us not only figure out how to take these skills we're working on in the classroom and bring it to the home, but even more importantly, what's happening in the home that they're doing that's working that we can use. And I think sometimes we forget to do that opposite. We're very focused on, let's tell you what we're doing. And I think we need to open up and say, and now you guys tell us what we can do better, where can we work, and what have you done that works really well. So I think that collaboration piece is super important. I also think a lot of our families with kids who have disabilities are really aware of inclusive practices. They know what they're looking for. And more we have families who are saying, I don't care what identified disability my child has, I don't want them out. I want them to be where everyone else is. I want them to be with their same age peer. All right, it could look different, but I want them with their same age peer. And we see the benefit of that over and over again.
And we do want to give the space for participants to ask any other questions that they might have. Maybe one more, just because I'm curious, is, oh, no, I want to go ahead and read this off then. Catherine Betcher asks, do you have any tips on how to match teachers for a team? Do you go through a process? So can you avoid personality conflicts, control for passive aggressive personalities? Yep.
Primarily. Yeah, that's funny.
There, but yeah.
Wait, drama with women or with teachers or with schools? What? This is not true. No, of course. And actually, yes, Catherine, there are a lot of things that we do that I've done with schools where we've even done things like speed dating, because I talk about co-teaching as like a marriage. We're talking about two adults trying to raise children, and we don't always have the same philosophy of how to raise children. We know the kids are going to try and play mom against dad, so we have to be on the same wavelength. We know it's not okay to go behind your spouse's back in front of the kids or talk about them. We know that communication is the most important part of any good marriage. So marriages, while arranged marriages can work for sure, most of the time we want it to be thoughtful. We want there to be volunteerism. We want people to have thought about. So I even do things like speed dating with schools where we'll do something fun, again, with that collaborative culture of get to know the other people who are at your site. You may be in your own silo or you may be new. How else can you do that? We also have surveys where administrators who feel like, hey, I haven't had anybody volunteer. How do I put these people together? So we have surveys for teachers, even for families and even for paraprofessionals. One of the books I have called Beyond Co-Teaching Basics and another one called Leading the Co-Teaching Dance. And both of those are geared toward administrators who feel like I need to figure out how to partner these people so they do play nicely. And then ultimately with the whole marriage analogy, I also want to point out that there are some divorces that are completely amicable, where you're like, this didn't work for me. You're a great person, but this wasn't a good partnership. I'm fine with co-teaching, just not with you maybe. And that's fine. It's the ones where it's really bad on the kids that's a problem. And that's where administrators need to come in and say, like, you guys need to not be together, right? And that's for sure an issue.
That's real practical advice, but also very helpful in just dealing with the real life problem solving that is going to exist. And
I think with all of this, the collaboration, whether it's with families, communities, each other, whatever it may be, communication is such a big deal. And I think we don't do enough of it in our teacher preparation, all of those things. I mean, we just say active listening, but I think we all need to do a better job of really thinking about how we communicate with others and saying, how will you tell me if I do something that bothers you? No matter what our relationship is, how will you tell me? How can I tell you? Having that kind of conversation will be helpful.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for your presentation, for your compelling thoughts and what you'll leave us with. I know I'm going to take away the inclusion is collaboration, and you don't know unless you ask. And that's, I think, really pulls a thread in, I think, what we're trying to attempt to do here. So thank you for that.
So you're welcome.
All right, so I'll go ahead and transition us into our next segment of our session today and introduce our community leaders panel. We have Kristen Hills, Director of Early Learning and Care in Mendocino County Office of Education. Welcome. Michael Bro, he is joining us from LA Unified School District as the Early Childhood Special Education Specialist. And Renee Mesquita, Early Childhood Education Division Director, also from the LA Unified School District. Welcome. So building off of the previous conversation, I wonder if you could maybe do a quick round robin of better introduction of yourself and the context that you're in. And then again, we'll leave it to the chat to post your questions. We'll block off some time to have that conversation. Kristen Hills, why don't you go ahead? You're the first one on my screen and we'll start there.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Emily. My name is Kristen Hills. As Emily said, I'm the Director for Early Learning and Care at the Mendocino County Office of Education. What inclusion looks like in our county we've always kind of had an eye to inclusion. Really, for the last 40 years, we've had full inclusion sites. When we first applied for our state preschool contract, it was actually through our SELPA. And so they always really wanted to make sure that we had co-teaching teams. And at this point, it's transitioned over to the County Office of Education, who holds the contract for state preschool. And then the districts have a special education program. So we partner very closely in each school district where we're providing the state preschool side of the program and they're providing the special education side of the program, but it's all together, all in one room, co-teaching model. So you have a certificated early ed teacher and also a site supervisor permit level for the general education side. And that's at our larger school districts, which in Mendocino County is really not that large. I'm sitting here with people from LA. So, but there might be like, I don't know, maybe one school district. I don't even know. Anyway, our other centers, we serve, of course, all children. I think in our very small communities, like we have centers that have maybe 5 or 6 kids every year. We're used to, I think, in really small communities, everybody is together caring for the students and we're all one community. There's a lot of in rural counties, I think that's really sort of the spirit of things to begin with also. And then we also provide a lot of services to help other centers become more inclusive with embedded instruction, with our inclusive early education expansion program. And we're seeing happily more and more resources go towards building inclusive programs. So that's sort of a general overview for me.
Thank you so much for that. And I can see that we're going to learn already from your experiences and, like you said, those practical recommendations and that model that you have. Thank you. Michael Lopez-Bro, will you go next for us?
Sure. As mentioned, Emily, my name is Michael Lopez-Bro, and I'm an administrator for the Los Angeles Unified School District that oversees over 600 preschool special education programs. And happy to say that I was, and I guess I'm going to date myself here, Renee, but not back to 1986 with PL 99-457 when preschoolers were invited and we addressed that issue to provide services. But several years later, I was privileged enough to be the second early childhood special education teacher in an inclusive environment that we had opened up. So I was at the beginning of our inclusive environments. We had been providing support services to kids in general education, but we hadn't opened up at the time all inclusive program and everything. So my claim to fame is I was the second early childhood special ed teacher in the program. We call them collaborative classrooms, preschool collaborative classrooms. We have a continuum of those because we work closely with our partners in early childhood education division. And so we work with them in the early education centers. We work with them and collaborate with them in the California State preschool programs. We collaborate with Head Start. So we really do have a continuum of different inclusive programs. And I'm happy to say that out of the 600 programs, it has been a slow process and progress, but I'm happy to say that we have over 30% of our programs that are inclusive. So with more to come. And so we're very excited with the UPK and UTK coming along because we have more opportunities now to actually engage and have more inclusive programs with our colleagues in early childhood education division. And just a big shout out to Dr. Morawski, because back a few years back, I don't know if you recall, but we invited her in and she gave us an incredible professional development when we were expanding and thinking out of the box of how we're going to provide additional inclusive programs to expand the transitional kindergarten, the ETK, when that came out, when the state rolled that out. So we ended up with over 55 ETK preschool collaborative classrooms, which are inclusive programs. And my partner right here is, I'll let her take it from there.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Renee Amasquita, and I'm an early childhood director with LA Unified. And definitely in our division, we work in partnership with our early childhood special education division. I had the wonderful opportunity to supervise an inclusive program at the Early Education Center when I was a principal. And it was a wonderful experience. And as Dr. Morawski said, it doesn't come without bumps in the road, right? But it's about addressing those bumps in the road and having that open communication and that dialogue and learning how to address and how to tell someone that they stepped on their toes, right? Ow, that hurt. Let's talk about this and see how we can move forward. But it's definitely about collaboration, communication, embracing parents as partners to do what's best for children. And it definitely takes both teachers sitting at the table using their areas of expertise to support each other and not being afraid to pick up that telephone, as I did many times. Help, Michael, we're struggling here. We have a challenge. And the challenges weren't necessarily with the students. Sometimes it was with the environment that we had set up, that we weren't just seeing something and we needed a different lens to look at our classroom to see what was happening and why we were experiencing the difficulty that we were at that time. But it's definitely having that openness to be able to reach out to your partner and work together and support each other. And it really is a collaborative process. And it does take a village, right, to be able to do that and support everybody and look at everybody as an equal partner in that playing field.
And I'll just piggyback on there with my favorite quote that was given to me, Renee, and you know this one, and I'm sure all of you have heard it before. It's the never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And it's kind of been our mantra because we have been a small group and we're getting larger, and we're anticipating to get even larger now with the rollout of UPK and UTK.
I was going to say, Michael, thank you for being on the frontier of that work. That story is really interesting, and for sharing that. And Renee, I was going to say, one of the quotes I will take away from your presentation is, ow, that hurts, but we'll get that. Because I think that is a lot of what we encounter in this work. Let me invite the participants of the session to put any questions that they might have for the group in the chat. I know it takes a minute to articulate or type them out. If you'd prefer to unmute yourself or speak up, we can also welcome that as well. I do always like to center the optimism of these conversations, but maybe you can speak to some of the challenges that you've encountered in the work that you're doing, and maybe some solutions that you've come up with along the way.
I would just say that one of the things I've noticed, and I'm newer to the administrative side, I've only been in it 5 or so years, but I was in the classroom for quite a number of years. And something I've noticed from the background between general education and special education teachers is that their training is very different, even if it's specialized to early childhood. And so I can't overemphasize enough the importance of planning time. And as people have been saying, this constant communication, and that door stays open. I've also found that it's been really helpful in coaching teams that are having trouble to sort of address that head on, that difference in training. For instance, special education teachers tend to be more rooted in behaviorism, whereas our general education teachers tend to be more rooted in like constructivism. And so helping them to understand that one size does not fit all, and that's exactly what makes inclusion so magical and helps adults grow as teachers. By really being intentional and saying, you know, there are times that you do some behaviorist things, even if you call yourself a constructivist. So it's just helping them to see the ways that the things they do have in common, I found has been really helpful. Also, cannot overemphasize the benefits of practice-based coaching. Having a regular person who's in the classroom all the time with the team, who's different from their administrator, what a gift that is. So anytime sites can get their hands on a coach who's going to be able to come in and work with them, it's a win for everyone, but most importantly, the kids.
Yeah, Chris, and I'll piggyback on that just a little bit because you're spot on with practice-based coaching. We've had the opportunity to actually have, we actually have 11 coaches that do go out to our inclusive programs and do provide that support. And they're using embedded instruction. It's one of our state's tools that we use, and it's been phenomenal. But I think one of the things through the years we've also learned about it, about inclusion and about, especially with adults, is that learning the dance, as Dr. Morawski said, but also acknowledging and valuing everyone's strengths that they bring to the table and saying to everyone, well, what do you like to do? What is it? Do you like music and movement? Then, okay, you're going to be doing music and movement all the time, or if you like art. And so identifying those skill sets that each of the adults have so that they're bringing joy to the classroom, because I think, as we know, we have another little mantra: happy children, happy teachers, happy children. And so it's really important, I think, if anything, through the years, I've realized that, making sure that we acknowledge and value and respect the strengths of each of the adults. And when I say adults, I mean from our special ed assistants to the general education assistants, to the special ed teachers, the general ed teachers, to the plant manager, to the office manager, and inviting them and making sure that you're acknowledging their strengths and what they bring to the program, the inclusive program.
Just to piggyback on that a little bit, it's having everybody sitting at that table doing that planning. Everybody looking at what it is that they're working on and how they can support the needs of all the students in the classroom and the opportunities they're providing for them. But from that, the assistants in the classroom to the teacher in the classroom, and as needed, that administrator that can provide that support as well, or the coach that can provide that support. So that's really important.
And I think, Renee, you acknowledged this, and I'll just acknowledge it again. It's hard. It's hard work, but it's worth it.
That's right.
As I said, 90% of our kids who are in inclusive programs go on to GE, go on to general education programs in their later career in school. So it's hard. It doesn't get easier. It's a slow process.
Can I jump in, Emily? Do you mind?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Are saying stuff, and it's so hard for me to be quiet when people are talking about inclusive classes, and so exciting. So just kind of to back up to what all of you have said in different times, but Kristen, you mentioned about how we train educators differently. And when I do training for pre-service or in-service teachers, they don't even know it. They don't realize, because special educators pretty much know, hey, I've been in a general education class before, I know what it looks like. But a lot of our general educators don't have an understanding of how we've been trained. So sometimes they bump heads and don't know why. So the idea of what you said of bringing that to their attention, that general educators typically have been taught to see the forest. How do I get all of these kids to get what they need to move on to the next level? Where special educators are looking at, I know we're all looking at the individual kids, but still it's those different perspectives. And even with our training, if we could have everybody, with this inclusive mindset, if we have everybody recognize that fair doesn't mean equal, and that we're doing different things, and that includes us as teachers, right? So I can be just to use your example, I can be a constructivist teacher, but recognize that this one child needs something different. It's not working for this child. So, hey, you've got other strategies in your toolbox because of your training. Wonderful, because I don't have them, and vice versa. So we don't just say this is how we teach. It's how do we teach this group of kids, or even just this particular child. And I think one of the things there would also be about roles and responsibilities. And I think, Michael, that goes to your having them have time to recognize their own strengths and say, it's not about whether I'm the early childhood special educator or general educator or coach or whomever. It's what do I bring to the table? And I bring to the table far more than just my label, just like the kids, right? And that's why you guys were all saying, oh, I'll do beadwork. I wouldn't have known that. That's awesome. So letting people share that, I think is helpful. I'm also going to put in the chat a way, first of all, a Padlet that has a lot of resources for co-teaching. But the one that I want to emphasize that I didn't bring up but might be helpful is also the co-teaching competencies, because those are things that you all as leaders, if you don't have a lot of experience, you're able to say, oh, what do I look for? What do I listen for? What do I ask for? How do I know that co-teaching is really happening? And sometimes having the teachers learn those competencies, if they're in service or pre-service, it just helps them know their roles too. Like, oh, okay. And we need to do a better job in teacher prep related to everybody.
Well, thank you all so much for the engaging conversation and for those, let's say, final remarks. Dr. Morawski, that has been very helpful, and hopefully we'll have a line of communication open so we can continue these conversations moving forward. I want to introduce Dr. Heidi Emberling, who will then introduce our final remarks for the day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Such an engaging conversation. I have the pleasure to welcome Supervisor Susan Ellenberg, a longtime champion for issues of importance to children, families, educators across Santa Clara County. She currently represents District 4 and serves as Vice President of the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Ellenberg consistently brings forward critical proposals that broadly support and benefit young children, focusing on key social determinants of health and well-being. She brings a wealth of knowledge, experience, deep insight into every effort to continuously improve our county's care of and service to its youngest citizens. I personally feel so fortunate and grateful to her for serving as our visionary chair of the First 5 Santa Clara County Commission, where she has guided our organization towards deep and lasting positive impacting community. Thank you, Supervisor Ellenberg, for being here today to close out our series and for showing up every day for children and families across the county.
Thank you so much, Heidi. And thank you to Emily and San Jose State's Early Childhood Institute, to my beloved First 5 and the Silicon Valley Community Foundation for sponsoring and inviting me to close out this really impactful 3-part webinar series. I also want to thank and acknowledge all of the school administrators and district administrators and community partners for showing up and participating in these conversations. With the rollout of Universal Pre-K, UPK, our county has the opportunity to think in transformative ways about the alignment between school districts and the early learning and care field. I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation, not only because early childhood is such a key priority for me as a county supervisor, but also because I'm able to engage with and hear from all of you on what works, what doesn't, and how we can all align to get the best possible outcomes for our children. I'm also here to wrap up the series and leave you totally inspired to change the world. So let's get started with that. The 3 webinars, as a quick review, focused on equity, quality, and inclusion. The first conversation grounded the work in equity and challenged us with the question, what are you doing or what do you plan to do to make universal pre-K and TK warm, loving experiences free of anti-Black racism that is culturally affirming for all students and families and educators? The keynote speaker, Keisha Nizoui, Public Policy Director for the California Child Care Resource and Referral Network and a trustee of Mount Diablo Unified School District, shared her passion for ensuring equitable access to meaningful early learning and care experiences for all children. She asked us to interrogate our resistance and confront what may be uncomfortable in order to be transformative. Keisha highlighted the ways in which Black women were the nation's primary early care and education providers for hundreds of years. And we know that for significant portions of those decades, they were not paid at all and eventually earned the honor of being grossly underpaid. Today, they're joined by women of color, immigrant women, bi and multilingual women, and women who speak a language other than English. And interestingly and frustratingly, those women rarely advance in what truly should be a career pipeline to early pre-K, TK, and even K-12 education. Keisha presented that stark evidence of extreme disproportionality in this important work by citing that 70% of center-based early educators, of course, mostly women, are people of color versus just 39% of public school and TK to 12 teachers. Keisha was right. Childcare and early care educators of color, again, mostly women, have been doing the work of caring and educating our 4-year-olds forever, as she said, forever. But how our society treats their hard work is nowhere near equivalent to the value of the job that caregivers, and particularly caregivers of color, do. They're not paid equitably, they're not provided worker protections, or they're not even first in line in our state with resources that are provided to educators in the K-12 space. In the second webinar, Dr. Carla Bryant from the Center for District Innovation and Leadership in Early Education challenged us to think deeply about how we define quality through an equity lens and based on the needs of our own communities. She particularly highlighted the importance of centering parent and community voices in these conversations and emphasized the critical use of data in our decisions and plans. She asked what is my personal favorite question: what is best for our children in our community based on the needs in this community? She followed that by noting that we will only know the answer if we listen authentically and deeply to community and ensure that all voices are at the decision-making table. This type of engagement is critical to ensure that systems are created and built for the children and families that they are meant to serve. And finally, today, thank you to Wendy Morawski from the Center for Teaching and Learning in Cal State Northridge for concluding this powerful series with an exploration of how we can create a truly inclusive early learning system, one that builds on the strengths and abilities of all children, families, and educators, and ensures that every place we create is a place of belonging. I also just want to acknowledge that along with our keynote speakers, that we were fortunate to hear from superintendents and educators from around the state who are thinking in transformative ways about the UPK rollout here in California. So let me wrap up with a call to action. As we move forward in this shared work, it will take all of us together to, as Keisha highlighted for us, and it bears repeating here, to interrogate the ways in which white supremacy continues to be upheld in our mindsets, practices, policies, and engagement with children, families, and educators. I know that for the work that I'm doing in this space through my platform as an elected official who has explicitly prioritized the well-being of children and families in Santa Clara County, this is the lens through which I need to intentionally and conscientiously remember to view the issues as I tackle them, as I tackle subjects around early learning and childcare in community with stakeholders, community members, and parents. As communities plan and roll out universal pre-K, I urge you to center equity, define quality in partnership with community, and ensure that all voices are included and truly valued. I hope that you will advocate for worthy wages for care providers and a career pipeline for childcare providers who want to move on to pre-K, TK, or even K-12 education positions. I hope that you will recognize that childcare, whether home or center-based, is a micro business, and our business associations ought to be including these entrepreneurs in their work when they talk about growing local economies. And should you care to support my agenda, you can help me ensure that Santa Clara County creates more facilities for childcare, plays a role in building a strong workforce pipeline, and expands access to affordable slots. If we all come together as a community, and based on these webinars and the input and all of the different groups that meet regularly, I am so confident that we can build a truly transformative system of early learning. And I welcome partnership opportunities and advice from any and all of you. As I tell my team constantly, I don't need to be right. We need to do the right thing. So I'm very serious about subject matter experts, which include everything from professionals who have studied early education to the parents who are raising small young children in this community. They often know best what they need. And I think children in our community are lucky to have this kind of network surrounding us. So thank you all again. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for your commitment. And let's keep doing this.
I am on mute, apparently. I was saying thank you for those inspiring words. This entire series has been beyond our expectations in the ideas that have been shared and the energy that we have felt from the speakers. And so we are looking forward to everything that is to come. If you are able to, please do give us some feedback as we think about our next steps. We would appreciate knowing what you valued from this series and what you might want to see in the future. And I know it's actually after 5, so I should let everyone go, although I want to stay and continue this conversation.